Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Elaina Shekhter. I lead marketing and strategy for EPAM. And it is my pleasure today to welcome an incredibly diverse and interesting panel of women leaders who will be joining me in talking about our International Women's Day topic, which is lessons in leadership, how we empower self and teens. And it's in the broader context of the overall global challenge theme, which is #ChooseToChallenge. And hopefully we'll have a conversation that sort of contextualizes this idea of women empowered to challenge the status quo and to create a world which is much more attuned and alert to the different changes going on. Hopefully together we can explore some of these topics in an effort to really celebrate all women's achievement, but specifically the achievement of the women of EPAM and our respective organizations. And our hope is to create an interesting conversation to raise awareness of International Women's Day and a lot of the various women's challenges that are facing us on a daily basis. So with that, maybe I'll get around to introductions. So first up is Ms. Ayumi Aoki. She's the founder and chief executive officer of Women in Tech. And I think she could probably introduce herself better than I can. So Ayumi, would you mind please letting us know who you are and what you've done and why you're here?
Oh, thank you so much. I'm very happy to be here. So my name is Ayumi Aoki, as you said. I'm half Brazilian, half Japanese. I grew up in South Africa and I've been living in France for the past 20 years. I have a company called Social Brain, which is a digital agency that I founded about 6 or 7 years ago. And I'm the founder and the CEO also of this nonprofit organization that's called Women in Tech that I founded 3 years ago. That's a global nonprofit. We have today about 50,000 members around the world, 20 chapters and scaling up. And our mission is to empower 5 million women and girls by 2030, giving them skills and confidence to achieve and be empowered in STEM and tech-related fields.
Next up, we have Elena Alikhachkina. I think I've done that well. If not, we can do it again.
Yes, thank you so much for introduction. So I'm happy to be here. So my name is Elena Alikhachkina, and I'm a global leader for data analytics. So currently I'm a VP at Danone and leading, as I said, the agenda for data analytics globally. So I think as a global leader, I'm definitely coming from really diverse background. Originally, I'm from Russia, but I'm living in States for 20 years. And had a chance to lead the data analytics challenges for really big international companies like Johnson & Johnson, Dow Jones, and you know, some companies in healthcare sector like GlaxoSmithKline and Novartis. So definitely have a lot of perspective into how operate in global environment and how drive the diversity in global environment.
We have Helen Shan, who's the CFO of FactSet, and also we're fortunate to have her as a member of our board of directors since 2018. Helen, could you introduce yourself?
Thank you. Happy to be here. And I joined the board and FactSet almost at the same time back in 2018, but I've spent my career largely in finance in all different ways, starting off more from the banking side, did that for about 11 years, and then moved to come on the client side for a number of years, and now work for FactSet, which is a fintech company focusing on data and analytics for the investment community. I've learned a lot in joining the EPAM board. Unlike my two predecessors, I'm not here with a technical background, although I was an engineering undergrad, so hopefully that helps me fit in and understand as well. But happy to be here with all of you.
Thank you, Helen. And last but not least, we have Jill Smart, who rounds out the other woman on our board of directors.
Well, thank you. Right now, I am the president of an organization called the National Academy of Human Resources. It's an organization where we recognize those as fellows who've significantly contributed to the profession. And then we're really all about giving back to the profession. So I became a fellow in 2009, and we have a number of programs for HR professionals. Prior to that, I was the chief HR officer of Accenture. I was with Accenture for almost 34 years. Spent most of my career there in consulting, technology, systems implementations, process change, and then moved into HR for the last 10 years. And I'm on a couple of boards now, and I do a little bit of HR consulting.
Maybe we can get on to the main topics of our conversation. So as I mentioned, as you all know, the theme for this year's International Women's Day is all around both the celebration of women's achievement, as well as empowering women to take action for equality. In the context of EPAM's programs, that empowerment isn't just about speaking out against sort of the status quo, but also empowerment related to helping bring women up in the organization, and a lot of work that we do around mentorship. So what I wanted to do is maybe get a point of view from each one of our panelists on how you think about building and mentoring successful teams, and what sort of strategies and what sort of commitments you're making in your own organizations that help to create sort of this virtuous cycle of empowerment, specifically for women, but perhaps even more broadly. So maybe we start with you, Ayumi, since this is somewhat of your life's work. Tell us.
So how do we drive the teams? I think the main thing is to be able to inspire and to build trust. I think that we have to be able to communicate your vision with the team. So what's your goal, what's your dream, in a very clear way, so that they know exactly what your vision is, so they can adhere to it or not, right? So they can follow it. So something's very clear, the message is clear. And I think once the message is clear, you have to inspire them to follow you, to believe in you and to create trust. And I think that way you can really build confidence, and you can build a motivation and team. I think a team is only going to be able to be very effective and have beautiful results if they feel inspired, if they have passion, if they want to do it. So for them to have passion, they have to be inspired, and for them to inspire, it's up to the leader to inspire them. And how do you do it? I think you have to show what your purpose is and what your dream is. And when you share your dream in a way that's going to inspire others, then people will come and they will adhere to your ideas, and they will help you build it. And when you build it together and you share your achievements, I think, it's just like a snowball, we just grow and scale.
Thank you. Elena, do you have a point of view to share with us?
Yes, absolutely. I think for myself personally, the mentorship starts from me understanding why it's needed, right? And I did have a really great mentors through my life, starting from my dad, who is actually, he was a high school principal for 25 years. So I'm definitely saw him, how he have been mentoring really challenging organizations, right? So when you have to mentor the teachers, the students, then you have to mentor different government organizations and making sure that you build all these relationships, right? So, and I did have really successful mentors through my early career, and now, and I'm actually keeping in touch with many people who I'm considering the mentors, right? So, and observing how these people is actually building, the help, right? What they usually do, they learn about you, right? And I'm using this strategy when I'm mentoring my team. So I'm mentoring individual people. I'm actually learning as much as possible about this person. So what is actually inspiring this person? What this person really like in a life, in a work environment, right? What is the biggest challenges this person is going through? Right, and for me, it's important is to bring the people with the different experiences and with different mind into the conversation together, right? So building this diverse environment where the leadership is actually happening really naturally, right? So, and I think for me, being especially in a data space, we're getting more and people coming from different agendas and different objectives, because people might be seeing data differently, but coming together, they basically mentor each other, right? So I do believe that mentorship is happening through the working together, through discussing the challenges together, and finding the common ground, right? And I think maybe for me is also because I worked as a professor in a college my early days. And I still have a lot of people who used to work for me or with me for many years. So they still come to me, and we still have mentoring conversations with people who don't even work with me anymore, right? So, but maybe these are my professor background is playing the role, but learning about the people and really understanding what they really want to achieve, I think it's a first step to mentorship.
Great, thank you. Helen, just curious, do you think that mentoring, presumably being a good thing for everyone, do you think there are different motions specifically for mentoring women and empowering women in these programs, or is it all just if you do it right, you do it right for everyone?
Thanks for that question. There's never a one size fits all for sure. I think many of the things that Elena and Ayumi talked about make sense regardless of gender. I do think a mentoring relationship is a very personal one and requires authenticity as well as transparency. It is different from something called sponsorship, which is much more active and is actually can be quite different. But more specifically to your point, when one is you should definitely always find a mentor that you best connect with, someone who's going to be honest with you, someone who hopefully has some experience that can help guide. I don't think it matters whether that person is exactly like you or a similar background, gender, race, so on. But to your point, I do think women in particular do experience things in many cases more similarly, or may identify with certain issues more easily. So from that perspective, as a mentor, it can form a more close relationship. And that's what mentoring can do if you're going to, especially if you're delivering both positive and constructive, and sometimes, more honest and tough guidance as well.
Thank you.
Yes, and maybe let me actually add a little bit to what Helen was referring to, because especially if we talk about the word of the STEM education, then starting mentoring as early as possible this is so important. So this is why I personally see for myself important for me to go into to go to my local school and really talk to girls about the education and talk about how interesting actually to work in a STEM and lead by example. Because what I found is that the women actually afraid to go into this field because they believe these are so difficult, this is so man-driven, and I don't have a choice, which is not true, right? And we see examples from many Eastern European countries where there is no such barrier, right? So there is so many articles about STEM education in Russia, and we can see how different the gender equity when the education starts much earlier, right? So I think we all have a role to play to go and talk to communities as early as possible to encourage girls. There are many communities like girls who code, girls who, math or whatever, but we actually have a choice to do this education much earlier.
Yes, I think we definitely agree with you. As EPAM, we spend a lot of time on early childhood education through our eKids program, and we are committed to Girls Who Code. Because even at a younger age, I think what we've discovered is that girls need an extra level of encouragement to raise their hands and actually believe that they can make progress in STEM fields. What can you share with us as far as your own insights or strategies that you've seen really succeed out there with regards to how we mentor women in an effort to empower them and their teams?
Yeah, so I think mentorship and empowerment are related, but I also think that they're very different things. So I was fortunate when I was at Accenture to have a number of mentors, both male and female, through the years that really, really helped me with my career. They helped me find the right opportunities. They helped me with my confidence to know that I could take those opportunities. And they really knew me because I had worked for them. And so they helped me get me out of my comfort zone. And I think that that's a really important thing that a mentor can do for a mentee, is to help them raise their hand, to find opportunities, and then be confident when they take those opportunities. I'm, one of the things that I really valued, because I was a very senior woman, I was married. I had a husband who worked and traveled. I traveled. I had 2 kids, and I felt like I was a very participative, hands-on mom. I didn't have a lot of role models. And so there weren't women that had a similar circumstance to me that I could go to, as a mentor. And so what I did was I pieced together, I had one female mentor who was single and then later married with no kids. I had a male mentor who was married and had a working wife. So I kind of found all the different parts of what I needed in different people. And I think that really benefited me. Now, because I didn't have that, it's really important for me to do it for other people. So I'm involved actually in 3 formal mentoring programs. And then I do a lot of mentoring, just when people call. My daughter will say, will you help her, and or my friend. And I think what's really important as a mentor is to listen. It's really important to listen to the person that you're trying to help. Be as objective as you can. Don't try and get them to come up with what approaches are to move their career or whatever it might be that they want some mentoring on, give them a safe space, right? That's the thing, is they need to have a safe space to be able to bring things to you for advice, no matter what it is, even if it's something that they did really wrong. Then from an empowerment perspective, sometimes for me, empowering people can be a challenge because I'm very hands-on. And so I think it's good if you are that way to really know it, because you have to really focus on it then. And so what I do is I think it's important to set expectations so that your team knows what you need, and then you got to let them do their job. And then lastly, I would say, you have to not only empower them so that they can go do their job and take it to the next level, they have to feel that when they need you or when they need help, that they can ask for it and it will not be looked upon as a weakness. Empowering them to ask for help is probably one of the best types of empowerment there is, I think.
Okay, let's turn to our next question. So one about leadership, and I think leadership is a fairly broad topic. And again, in the context of the idea of challenging the status quo and having sort of the courage to question established norms and demonstrate different types of leadership, maybe open it up. Helen, maybe we start with you. How do you recommend, or maybe using yourself as an example, up to you, how should women think about themselves as leaders, and how do you find those opportunities to put yourself in that position?
Yeah, those are good questions. For myself, as I was earlier in my career and coming up, a lot of times people talk about taking classes or whatnot to learn to be a leader. I found the best way is I'm an observer, and so I worked in an environment in banking where I got to work with many different types of folks, including many different teams. And what I found was there were traits in certain leaders that I admired or respected or wish I had. And there were some that even if I wish I had, I could not be. So I'll give some examples because sometimes that helps. So I worked with a female managing director. She's a native New Yorker. She was tough. She used to smoke in the building. That tells you how old I am, because back then you could smoke in the buildings. and she could swear and she can keep up with the best of them. And that wasn't me naturally. But what I did see from her was her ability to connect to clients, her ability to be an advocate, how she tried to develop other people around her, how she was actually being quite authentic to who she is. And to me, authenticity is such an important part of leadership. So that's what I took away from her, from a learning there. And then there was another person, who was the head of M&A. And I saw him in client meetings and I saw how he acted. Again, I was not him, but the way he spoke about things that I'm pretty sure he only knew 80-20. He did not know 100%. And my natural comfort zone is I need to know exactly what I'm saying. So when I say it, I know I'm right. But I was fairly sure on some of the things that he said. I don't want to say he made it up, but he knew enough to say it with confidence. And so to me, and he often would pass the ball to others on the team. I took that as something that I then put in, and I hope I'm doing with my own teams. So I think when you're learning leadership, you can do it by pulling from different folks. But when you talk about finding opportunities for leadership, then that's where I have found I need to get pushed out of my comfort zone. I need to take on things that I really am not 100% there for. And that's often where you'll learn, and that's often where you're able to show your impact. So when you ask around how do you develop yourself as a leader, to me, it's both about learning how you see how others that you might respect, how do you make it your own, because you're only authentic, and you're only a good leader if you're authentic. And then often pushing yourself into a place where you kind of had to prove yourself, probably to yourself as much as to everyone else.
Great, thank you. Elena, maybe we go to you. Feel free to cover any of these topics. I guess I'm curious, maybe volley up an even more controversial question. So I have 2 daughters, and we spend a lot of time talking about sort of not feeling the pressure to have to be perfect all the time, because I think women in general feel that pressure. And to recognize when you might need help and learn how to be confident asking for that help without that sort of making you feel like you're less accomplished or less of a leader. I wonder sort of if you want to share some experiences or some insights on how particularly to work with women and help them to become better leaders, even if they aren't perfect.
Yeah, so I think this is the great question, and hope you're not asking the wrong person because I'm also the perfectionist as your daughter, right? So for me, everything have to be really in a good way, right? But over my time, I'm definitely learned how I actually need to develop myself, right? To really understand what is possible, what is not possible, and I think this topic is actually touching the topic of resilience, right? So how actually we build the resilience. And several years ago, I was a part of the leadership conference, and I was leading the facilitation of this topic, right? So I got a lot of really good insights from different women in terms of how they actually build the resilience at work. So I published an article. So this article is still on LinkedIn, where I talk about like what is actually the tricks you should be using when you feel you need help, and how you how you recognize you need help, right? So some examples, maybe what I was actually talking about in this article and the conference. I mean, first of all, is actually starting from your plans to be realistic. Right, so for us to do not be in stress, we have to think forward, not creating the stress for ourselves, right? And the first step, not creating the stress, is really understanding the plans, right? And understanding how this plans is gonna play out, right? So, because a lot of stress is actually coming from, and a lot of uncertainty is coming from unknowns, right? So, having like an ownership of certain aspects, and maybe these aspects are limited, it's a good way to prevent the stress from even starting, right? So I think another life lesson is actually accepting the change is a part of life, right? So I heard this so many times when people saying, you know, the transformation is going to end, everything is going to be the same. So it's never going to be the same, right? So it's never going to be the same because the economies are continue, the evolution is going to continue. The company is going to continue evolution. The job we're doing is also going to be changing, right? So and it's basically unproductive to think about that everything can stay the same for next 10 years, 20 years, right? So being as a part of change and being the person actually who is finding opportunities in the change. So this is a good way of to become a better leader, but also it's a good way to manage your stress, right? Because you living with this change, you have a the change mindset, right? I think another one is definitely the lessons which I learned is to understand and analyze what is really pushing your buttons, right? So when you try to think about is like where you need help, you need to think about is actually who, what, where, what situation is really making you to feel pressure, to feel stressful, right? And for me, it's helping actually to write on a paper, because I do feel when I'm writing in a paper, I'm kind of living through the situation, and I'm helping myself to build up more understanding what I need to do for the future, and actually how I have to be reacting to certain type of situations, right? And I think another is accepting help from others, because I think there are some bias when it's kind of expected that strong leaders should not be accepting help, which is completely not true. So strong leaders actually relying on the teams who are helping them, right? And if I don't have some technical knowledge, I always have the best people in my team who have this knowledge. If I'm not an expert in communications, there are people who can help me in communications, right? So I would say accepting help, it's a strong side of a good leader, right? And being able to build this help around you and provide help to others. So this is also the part of the leadership, and it's also the part of resilience. So these are a couple of themes I would love to talk about.
Thank you. Great. Ayumi, if we just go to you, all these are great insights. The other sort of thing that we've noticed is that women don't tend to advertise so much their achievements, and it's harder for women at every level to leverage their results, the product of their work, to actually make an impact for their careers, but also to make a positive impact more broadly. And I wondered, with all of the things that you're doing to promote engagement and sort of impact, what words of advice would you have to women on how they can best leverage their achievements to make the most positive impact?
I think they must, great question. Thank you so much. I think they mustn't be scared or that to share exactly their achievements, because many women will think, and in the beginning I was the same, saying, you know, if I'm going to be saying everything that I do, then people will think that I love myself, that I just want to show off or something like this. And I think you have to be proud of your achievements, and also recognize the good things that you do, right? We're not good in everything, but some things that we are good at, I think we have to show and tell, and and be kind to ourselves as well. You know, accept that we're not perfect, but there are some things that we are good at, and let's say it out to the world, because that's the way they're going to be role models for other women. So I think that also when you are giving recognition to your peers, to your teammates, to other inspiring women, those are the ways that they, in their turn, they're going to be giving back to other women around them, you know, being role models. So I think that when you do it not only for yourself, but for others, for your teams, for people that you admire, in all different areas of, you know, of your team and of society, I think it's a way that can also encourage more women to share their stories. Because I think when we share your story about your storytelling, we always find the uniqueness in every one of us. And I love this quote from Oscar Wilde saying, be yourself, everyone else has already taken. That's so true. I think we have to learn to accept and to recognize the things, you know, the authenticity and what makes you so special, and just make that your force. And you know, and by spreading out, sharing your special your specialness, that you're gonna be able to inspire others as well.
Yeah, that's a great lead in to, I think, the second theme for ours to explore, which is sort of this general leadership theme. And as you know, at EPAM we have many sort of opportunities to build leaders and to encourage women, and yet there are still, you know, it's still a challenge for us to actually move women in through and up to the leadership levels of the organization. And so there's two kind of things I was hoping you could talk about. One is maybe picking up on what you said, and, you know, how do you recognize when you need help, and how do you ask for it, regardless of where you are in your career? And then the second is, you know, what sort of things would you expect women, as they get up into the leadership levels in the organization, what would you advise women to do to find opportunities to develop their leadership skills and actually position themselves as leaders?
So I think you hit on two really important things: asking for help and finding those opportunities. So I'll start with a very a personal story. So when I was an associate partner at Accenture, I was up for partner. I was running a job, and the partner on the job actually came from strategy. He was not a technology partner, and he really just, he didn't provide the leadership we needed. So I really stepped in and really played the role of partner. Towards the end, I kind of felt like I was a little bit out of my league, right? And so I went to one of my boss, and I told him what was going on, and we brought in another partner. We switched partners. We got the right kind of technology partner in, and some of the problems that were starting to surface, everything went away. You know, we got it all fixed. And he called me when everyone, you know, was up for partner, and I didn't make partner that year. And I was shocked. I was like, I was running a job, right? I did the job of a partner, you know, for a year and a half. And he said, yes, and it all turned out okay, but by not telling us that this partner was not the right person, you put the firm at risk. You put the project at risk. You put the client at risk. You should have not just thought, oh, I'm just going to take over and do it. You should have come and asked for help. And I mean, while it was devastating to me because all my peers, you know, made partner that year, it was actually one of the best lessons I ever learned. And you can bet that I asked for help early and often. That was my mantra, early and often. You can't go ask for help if you haven't done everything you can, you know, analyze the problem, look for certain solutions. But even if you need help weighing solutions, right? If you bring a problem to someone that you kind of have dissected and analyzed, you'll find, at least in my career, I found when I asked for help, no one ever said no, and no one ever told me like that I shouldn't be asking for help.
And you don't think women sort of have this feeling like we need to be perfect and we don't need help? Like, how do you get around that?
Well, for me, the way I got around it was I paid a really big price for it. Mm-hmm. Right. And so I think that sometimes, like the first or second time when you're really asking for help and you get it, it just makes it so much easier the next time. Right. And so I think it's like anything else, practice at it. Right. Practice. And I think for everyone, it's really important, and particularly for women, we need to help each other. Right. And so if you see another woman struggling, or maybe they need to be asking for help, call them out on it and help them with that. So, I mean, we have to help each other. I mean, not just with women, with men as well. Right. But so I do agree. I think in my experience, women more than men, right, are afraid to ask for help. And so I have actually spent a lot of my time leading teams and mentoring people to feel comfortable in asking for help.
Okay. I mean, we talked a little bit about how you leverage your achievements to make an impact. I think you've had such a wealth of different experiences. I mean, I think, again, you know, this continues to be a challenge. Women don't necessarily promote themselves. They don't necessarily put themselves up for those leadership roles. And some of our other panelists shared examples like that. But do you have a thought on sort of what is the right way to leverage the achievements to actually promote yourself and make a difference?
Yeah, so I absolutely do. So we have to be, this is a two-sided coin. As an individual, we have to take responsibility for making sure that we're building our skills and that we are finding those opportunities. We should not just sit and wait until somebody calls you and says, oh, do you want this do you want to work on this different client? Do you want to work on here, right? You need to kind of know, not exactly the path you want. I never did, but the things that you would like to do next. And then you need to spend time building relationships. And it really isn't necessarily mentorships or counseling of any kind or advocates. It's just relationships, right? And so because on the projects I was on at Accenture, I built very close, functional, loyal relationships with people that were above me, below me, and at my level. And because of those relationships, then, like, let's say if they're at the next client, you know, they'll think, oh, Jill might be right for this role versus going through a formal staffing kind of process. Or I might say to them, hey, when you go to the next client, will you think of me? Like, take me with you. So putting the seed in there that you would like for them to look out for you and to look out for opportunities and remind them of that a lot, that will help keep it top of mind. You also have to, I think all too often, I'm not sure this is so true anymore, but, you know, especially in a world of consulting where you're traveling a lot, if you're a woman and you have kids, you know, a lot of times leaders will think that a father is more willing to travel and go to a client than a mother. And so while that's wrong, at least for some people, right? Maybe not for everyone, because some fathers don't want to leave either. So the thing that I always emphasized when I was in HR was don't make any assumptions. So teach your leaders to not make any assumptions that because I'm a woman, I don't want to work in oil and gas. Because I'm a woman, I don't want to travel. Or because I'm a man, I don't want to go work in fashion, right? I mean, so you have to get rid of all those biases and just look at the person as an individual. So as a leader, it's important to know what you want. And as an individual, it's important for you to make sure I know what you want.
Thank you. Do any of you want to add any more on any of these topics?
Sure, I'm happy to. And I'm going to borrow something that I had heard once from someone named Carla Harris, who is a senior person at Morgan Stanley. She talks about the fact that there's two different types of currency. There's performance currency and relationship currency. And in the beginning of your career, you know, the performance is worth about $1.50, right? It's worth more than $1. So that's what gets noticed, and that's what you focus on, and you exceed the ask and so on. And that's fine, that's in the beginning. But as you become more senior, you need to translate that into a different currency, which is relationship currency. And part of that is developing the ties, not necessarily, you know, bragging about it, but to talk to understand what's valuable for others, to make sure that other people know what you do. If we think we just keep our head down and we work and we'll get noticed, that might work when you're early in the career, but that isn't going to work later on. And also that $1.50 will start to become worth less and less. Your currency becomes less and less as you become more senior. So sort of building on Ayumi's point, which is very much along the lines of, you know, you want to share your story, you want people to know what you do, but you also have to do it in a way by making sure that others know all the value that you've provided. And that's not just your manager, that has to be others. And that can come more naturally, again, if you use a relationship currency, because in the end, that relationship currency is what's more valuable when you're not in the room, when decisions are getting made, right? Around comp, around promotions, around projects. And so you need both currencies. And that's regardless, men or women, but women tend to rely a little bit more on the I will do my best and get the work done, and you can't lose the relationship piece.
Great. Yeah, this is incredibly helpful, I think, for all the women at EPAM and beyond. Shall we move on to our next section? So developing inclusive teams, which is something that I think brings us back to what you just said, which is, increasingly as the work and the challenges become more complex, certainly in technology, that's the case, but I think more broadly, that's also the case. And as the world becomes more interconnected and the problems become more multidimensional, the teams have to become multidimensional. And what certainly we found is that there's a really big challenge of building multidisciplinary teams out of people who don't have exactly the same backgrounds. And how to encourage those people to connect deeply in a meaningful way so that they can work on projects together, how to make those teams truly kind of leverage all of the individual and the team talents has been a real challenge. So I'm wondering if you all can share your perspectives on both the vision as well as practical advice for our managers, for our women and men who are developing these multidisciplinary, often global teams and how to get the best out of them. So Elena, maybe we start with you.
Yes, thank you so much, Anna. So I would say I actually start from the purpose, why we're really doing this, right? Because if we look around us, that our consumer and customers, they represent the really diverse population. So, and when I talk about the diversity here, it's a diversity not just about the gender, it's a diversity about the age, it's a diversity of different social backgrounds, it's diversity by locations. And for us to be really successful and provide the products and services to our consumers and customers, we also have to have this diverse thinking. Right, so there is a lot of studies have been done, and I'm a data person, just reminding. So a lot of studies have been done, which actually proven that if there is a diversity in a team, and again, I'm referring not just to women or men, right, but in the broader context, diversity. So these teams are performing way better. So they performing more differentiated insights to customer and consumers, the better products, they do it faster because they actually understand this diversity of the market and diversity of consumer needs. So what we definitely doing this, we're making sure that we are building the different agile organizations and different teams where we have representations, and maybe in this sense, I'm a little bit lucky of the diversity because in data, just by default, the success in data means that you bring the people with different teams, with different opinions to work together on the same agenda. If we talk about the technology topics, if we talk about the data topics from gender diversity, yes, we still see definitely more men in the room, right? But again, as I mentioned before, it's happening from the educational background. We definitely have to start much early educating about this type of field. But I do see the difference because when I actually started working in a data field like more than 20 years ago, and I was attending like global conferences, like a technology conference or data conferences. So you can say that almost there is no women. You don't see women like in the panel. You don't see women to be selected for presentations. And now we see more and more topics actually presented by women, right? And I think what I got from one of the conferences, which I really like, because the question in the panel came, what really women do in data? And there was interesting answer saying that women is actually helping to humanize the data. So they make it human, they make it actually understandable by average consumer. So it made it less technical, so less acceptable, right? And driving the bigger change management, right? So this is something from my background, and so from my experience, is how the diversity is important.
Thank you. Ayumi, maybe we go to you, just picking up on what Elena mentioned around humanizing the data and making technology or information in general more accessible. How is it that you envision a future that is sort of much more diverse, much more equal when it comes to gender, but across the board?
So I think, first of all, to ensure that we have more diversity, we have to really make a big effort. Obviously in HR, so it starts from very early age. It's not something that starts when you arrive in the workplace or when you arrive in education. I think it's a big job because it starts as early as when we are born because of all the hidden bias that we have in society, right? So we have to educate or try and re-educate girls that they can do really anything they want to, right? But it goes from the parents to the students to the teachers in every single part of a woman's career life cycle, and especially when it comes to the workforce once we are trying to hire diverse teams, because as you all know that diverse teams, they do perform better. So how do we ensure that we're going to be hiring a more diverse team? So I think today with COVID and with all this workplace being going so remote, it's a bit easier in the sense that, you know, distance, we don't have to go to, we can live really around the world. So it's already better if you can get people from that work in different areas because also of the social division or the social gap that we can find. People where they're very far away from a workplace or live in another town or live in another country, they won't have the same chances to get in a certain job because sometimes it's too far. So I think the way the future of work and what has been done lately because of COVID and everything, it's something can be something positive. You know, if we try to be resilient and put this crisis in a positive way, this is how we can try and change it. But I think we must also understand the behavior of women and men. They are very different. So for instance, when there is a job opportunity that's going to be posting online, women and men have very different ways to react to it. So a woman will only apply to it, for instance, if she has 95% to 100% of all the qualifications. While men, as soon as they have 50%, they think, oh, this job is for me, I am perfect for it. Also, if a man, they will tend to answer straight away. So like in the first few days of application. So sometimes if you only, the first few days of application, we already have maybe 200, you know, applications, we're going to start looking at them and then saying, okay, this guy is good, this is good, this is good, this is good. And perhaps we're not going to be waiting until the whole full time that we gave the time, you know, for the person to answer it. And statistically, women tend to try and make it so perfect because they want to redo the CVs, they want to redo the photos, they want to redo the letters once and again, and they will stand at the last minute just to make sure that they couldn't do it any better. But what they don't know is that by that time, you know, the HR, they already made their choice. It's a bit too late. So just thinking, okay, maybe instead of looking at those application forms like in the beginning, but really wait until the next day, things like that. It's understanding different behaviors because we are different. It's a way to make sure that, you know, we can be more inclusive.
I think this is great insight, Ayumi. I didn't know about this one, but yeah, it's definitely good insight. Yeah.
I think it's true. Helen, any comments?
Sure. Maybe I'll build up on this with maybe 2 specific examples, because your first question was around what can managers do. So first, the tone always starts from the top in this future that we want to live in. And to have an inclusive culture, you do it because it's the right thing to do, but you also do it because look at the world around us. It is changing so rapidly, and therefore you have to be innovative. In order to be innovative, you need a lot of ideas. In order to have lots of ideas, you're going to have different ideas with people with different experiences and different perspectives. In order to do that, then you need to make sure that in the room, or in some cases the virtual room, that you have those varied voices. So even though we know what's the right thing to do, it's also what is the practical thing to do, which is to have an inclusive culture. The 2 examples that come to mind, and in particular, this is related to somewhat with gender. So I worked for someone who talked about interviewing for a position, 2 candidates. One was a male, one was a female. And the woman came in and talked about all the reasons why she could do this role, but also all the reasons why it would be tough and all the negatives around, or the risks around it. And then the gentleman came in and just said, basically, I could do this role and all the positives around it. Now, this person, this manager, ended up choosing the female because she said that she'd already thought about all the downsides. She'd been very, very thoughtful in her approach. And so she felt that that was the way to go, even though that's not how she sold herself, right? So that's the first one. The second story is a friend of mine whom was working at a large, one of the big banks, and they were looking to put someone to be head of M&A. And so she was on the panel of asking, who do you think should be on the panel to be head of M&A? And they all talked about, you know, different folks, but she never thought of herself as the person who could be the head of M&A. Ultimately, it just never occurred to her, and yet they chose her. And so my point isn't so much that, you know, it's accidental or it's positive or whatever. My point is that there's different approaches that people take to build on what was said, and that if you're a manager, you need to recognize that there are differences in people, and if you want the best person and you want to have the best team, you will need to adjust. If you want to win, this is just purely, you know, being selfish. If you want to win, you want the best people, and if you want the best people, you have to understand that there are differences amongst different folks.
That's great. And so then, sort of to our last question, maybe an open-ended one. You know, we've been on really the beginning part of a journey at EPAM, talking and starting to think about inclusivity and sort of all of its multiple forms. And, you know, we can do whatever we may want as a corporation, but it comes down ultimately to how we build our teams and how we encourage those teams to kind of have a more diverse and more inclusive point of view, which depends ultimately on our ability to build the right connections amongst individuals. And so tell us a little bit about sort of your view on how you build those connections, how you build sort of these sustainable, inclusive teams.
So in building inclusive teams, and inclusive organizations as a whole, I think there's many different facets to it. Mm-hmm. So for example, we can't just say, let's have 50% of our senior leaders be women within X number of years. If you don't have anyone in your pyramid, that's anywhere in that pipeline yet. And if maybe, finding people is very difficult. So the first thing I think we need to do is start at the bottom of the pyramid and set some goals, whether again, it's gender, ethnicity, whatever it is, where there are pools of candidates. I mean, if you look at the stats of, people graduating from colleges, and in many cases, it's women are more than 50% of it in many different parts of the world. And so let's just start there. Let's hire people, whether it's people of color, whether it's women. Let's start to build the bottom of our pyramid so that then we can move them up. Then with the people that are there already, so let's say you're focused, on women, right? It's not just development programs. There are development programs. There are mentors. The most important thing, I think, to have women be progressing is the experience they're getting. Mm-hmm. So I think the opportunities, especially, in a place like EPAM where they're assigned to projects, many of them, right? And mm-hmm. So really making sure that we're getting them on projects that challenge them, that teach them, that progress them. For example, making sure that, especially in a world like ours with consulting and people moving into different teams, make sure that they get a variety of teams. And if you're working for the same people for a really long time, you as an individual should be trying to branch out and work with them to try and get different opportunities, not just for the skill sets, but for the relationships you're building. I also think that an organization should have a statement. What is it that you want to achieve? And it doesn't have to be a percentage by a certain year, but what is it that we are trying to achieve, right? And how do we want to do that? And there's a lot of external opportunities for women as well outside your organization to build their skills and build their networks, while they're still working at EPAM, and that plays a really big role as well. So those are kind of my thoughts on at very high level, right? And trying to commit to having an inclusive organization. Obviously, I think everybody knows it has to start at the top, right? I mean, the leaders from the CEO down has to be committed and believe in that inclusivity, in the equality, because if they don't, right, it will not permeate. And so that's really, really important, which is why it's great having, leaders like you guys have that I know are really trying to focus on this. And then at a team level, so I'll just close by saying at a team level, the leaders of those teams need to be held accountable. And inclusivity means so many different things, but the most important thing I think it really means is that I feel welcome, right? I feel I'm not differentiated because of the color I am or the gender I am, but I feel welcome and I feel a part of that team. And it's even harder to do that now that we're not physically together. I always was part of remote teams anyway, and part hybrid teams, I guess I would say. And so I think we have to make a real effort to make people feel welcome.
Thank you, Jill. That's exactly what we're trying to do. So as you know, it's not easy to move the needle in a meaningful way. Great. Well, I think this was the end of our formal program, but I do have a quick fire challenge. I hope if you don't mind. So given that we just finished a really unprecedented 2020 and are now fully in the midst of 2021, which continues to be somewhat challenging, and just sort of keeping in mind the context for the theme for this year, which is choose to challenge, which I'll interpret that as a call to action to challenge the status quo. If you had one piece of advice for the women of EPAM for this year, what would it be? And maybe Aoki, we start with you.
Me?
Yes.
I would say find your purpose. Have a dream. May it be personal, professional, but something that you're passionate about, and take action. I think we have every day wake up knowing what we want, what really drives us inside. If it's for something for your family, for your personal, but something that makes you happy and gives you the force, because it's so hard sometimes, especially nowadays with this pandemic, to go ahead, to carry on, to go onwards and upwards, as we say, that you can only do that if you're really convinced and passionate about something. So I would say, find your passion, find your purpose, and really take action. Don't wait for someone else to do it. Even if it's a small thing, but do it and start today. I always say, don't wait. I'm going to do it once the pandemic goes over. I'm going to do it once, I'll be able to travel. Start today. We can find different ways of doing it, but take action and really make it, transform this difficult period into something positive by taking action today of achieving something that you're really passionate about.
Great advice. Elena, what about you?
Yeah, so I would build on this. So basically, take the challenge as an opportunity. Find opportunity in a challenge. And I'll give you an example which is totally relevant, because you can see how companies now turned into data and analytics and technologies during this crisis, right? So which means that it's definitely the opportunity for women who is in STEM to look into what they really like to do, how they would love to grow, because this opportunity was created out of the challenge, right? So do not go against the challenge. Take the challenge as an opportunity to build new skills, to maybe start something new, especially, as I said, the field of data analytics, technology, digitization is gonna continue growing more and more. So take this, build new skills, and go with it.
Great advice. Helen?
I have a very similar one, so I'm trying to think of a different one. I think personally, one of the things that I feel like I've learned, or at some point in these many endless Groundhog Days, is what am I waiting for? There's always something that you know, whether it's something silly like I'm saving a nice bottle of wine, or something that you, I'll talk to this person at some point, and there's a part of me that says, what are you waiting for? Because, you know, tomorrow, who knows? So that kind of builds on what was said. I suppose the other one that also comes to mind, if I was to give advice during this, is that is something that, and I'm a fan of Serena Williams, and she said, you have to believe in yourself when no one else does. And I think that's important, because often we can question ourselves. And if you don't believe in yourself, then who will? So I guess I'll use that as something, not necessarily COVID specific, but something to for us to take away from.
I think it's speak up. If it's one thing, because if your leaders don't know how critically important this is to you, you know, whether it's gender equity, whatever that, you know, one thing is, speak up and keep speaking up. I will, you know, unfortunately, I don't make enough time to read business type books, but, you know, one of my favorite books was Sheryl Sandberg's Lean In. And because it was like, I could have written it, like the things that she did in there, like, you know, even things like what she would do when she was under pressure, it was like, oh my God, that's so me. But I also, so lean in, but I have also seen women in particular lean in so far that they're like crawling over the desk to the person on the other side and like grabbing them by the throat, not literally, right? But it's too much. Find the right balance. And so speaking up, I always tell people, you don't want to be whiny or complaining. You're speaking up to making sure that your leaders know what's important to you. Speak with facts. Here's why everyone will benefit, right? If we had an inclusive organization or whatever it is you might be trying to achieve. And then the last thing I'd say is be part of the solution, not just the problem. Right? So when you're speaking up about what the challenges are, you have to also be part of the solution, and not make it someone else's problem, because it's all of our problem.
Thank you. Wonderful. Really appreciate it. Is there anything you want to add? I mean, we're going to cut and paste anyway. Anything we should have talked about from your point of view?
I mean, not a specific question, but I have to say that, you know, there's so much going on in the world. And if we think about, especially right now, there's so much pressure being put on women. I mean, you hear in the news every day, right? It's going to take women in the workforce years to get back to where they were pre-pandemic, right? And a lot of it has to do particularly with women who've had to either give up their career because they have kids at home that they had to homeschool, or it just interfered, right? Their personal life interfered with being able, you know, to continue to focus on that career. And because of the unemployment, right? And so many of the jobs, a lot of them, you know, were a lot of females, such as in retail, for example. And so I think that this is a time where we have to kind of really stick together, help each other, not just women, but men and women, to make sure that some of these predictions of how long it's going to take us to get back to pre-pandemic don't come true.
Agree. Great. Well, thank you, all of our panelists. I really appreciate your insights. I think it'll be a really interesting conversation to play back and watch. Maybe we'll have a watch party if you all are available once it's all done. I think that's the end of the formal chat, I guess.